Dear sir and madam, my name is Denis Karasyov. I am the CEO and owner of EB-5 Expert company based in Dubai. I'm very happy to introduce you today our partner, Brandon Meyer, from Meyer Law Group from United States. Brandon, hi.
Good morning, Dennis. Good to see you again. Good to talk to you. And
Yeah.
thank you for the opportunity here.
Yeah. It's evening already here. I know it's very early morning in the United States. Thank you for this interview, and thank you very much for your time. Brandon, today I would like to talk with you regarding EB-5 program. As you know, we work with your company for many years, and we have a lot of Russian investors. I mean, Russian-speaking investors from CIS region. So I would like to talk to you today regarding EB-5 program and introduce you to the public to give a chance the potential EB-5 investors to know more about your company, about what you are doing, about your experience. So first of all, can you please tell us more about yourself and your company?
Sure, Dennis. Again, name is Brandon Meyer, Meyer Law Group, immigration law firm headquartered in San Francisco with additional offices in New York, San Diego, California, Charlotte, North Carolina, Vietnam, and Guangzhou, China. And who knows, maybe sometime soon, maybe coming to Dubai. We'll just have to wait and see about that.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I have personally been involved in the EB-5 industry for over 25 years now. And Meyer Law Group has been in business for close to 15. So we've been very active and deeply entrenched in the EB-5 space.
Okay. That's really impressive. And how many years your company works in EB-5?
So the company itself has been in existence for approximately 15 years.
Wow. Okay. And Brandon, can you tell us what is the success rate of the EB-5 petitions in your company, which usually it's a very common question from our investors. How many petitions were declined by the immigration company, you know?
No, absolutely. So pretty close to 100%. Off the top of my head, the 4 or 5 that have failed over those years out of the approximately 2,000 or more that we have processed failed due to applicant fraud. So nothing that had to do with the work of Meyer Law Group, nothing to do, just, the individual applicants tried to perpetuate fraud, and the US government actually checks on these things and they got caught. So I can say, but for that, our record would be 100%.
Well, that's really impressive. Thank you for sharing this information with us. By the way, I see on the back of you, the chair is quite old.
It
You
is
keep
quite
this,
old.
yeah, you specially keep this chair old?
Yeah, it looks old because it is old, but it's still very, very comfortable.
Ah,
And
okay.
since I have been in it for probably 10 plus years, I'm very reluctant to give it up because although, yeah, it looks a little not the best shape, it actually is still very, very comfortable. And so I
It's
like it a
a,
lot.
I would say it's I would call it success chair, yes?
Definitely has a lot of experience in this field.
Okay. Brandon, tell us please more about EB-5 program, especially in the light of last changes that have been implemented a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's a great question, Dennis. So EB-5 in general has been in existence for nearly 35 years. However, the EB-5 law was updated in March of 2022. And so I will get into the aspects of the EB-5 law that changed, which in my opinion, these changes make this the best time ever for EB-5 from an investor perspective. But generally speaking, EB-5 is the quickest, most direct route for most people to immigrate to the United States. And so EB-5 requires an investment of either $800,000 or $1,050,000 into a qualifying EB-5 project. We're successful, you know, the two spouses and children under the age of 21 can all immigrate to the United States and obtain permanent residence from the beginning through the EB-5 program.
Okay, okay. Well, that's amazing. Yes, and we are very happy because in comparison with what EB-5 was a couple of years ago, right now it's much more attractive. Another question that I would like to ask you is the very popular question that we hear constantly from our Russian-speaking investors for the last year, I would say. There is a lot of information that EB-5 program is not available anymore for Russians due to sanctions. So can you please clarify? We know the question, but we would like you to answer this question. Is there any limitations for Russian citizens to participate in EB-5 program?
Currently, there are no limitations for Russian citizens to participate in the EB-5 program. EB-5 is open and available for applicants with Russian citizenship.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. And I think that one of the great examples that EB-5 program does not have any relation to sanctions is that fact that the Iranian citizens, right, the citizens from Iran still can apply for EB-5, taking into account that fact that the sanctions against Iran raised almost, I would say, 10 or maybe 20 years ago.
No, that is absolutely correct. So, there may be some additional hoops for, EB-5 investors from Iran and Russia to go through if they're currently holding their money in banks that are subject to US and other international sanctions. But generally speaking, once that issue is resolved, and it's usually resolved prior, as a part of the EB-5 preparation and due diligence process, once that issue is resolved and the money is outside of Russia, if it's in a bank in Dubai, or if it's a bank in Greece or somewhere outside of Russia or Iran, as long as we can trace the funds from its origin and all the way in every step through the process, then there's generally not an issue.
Okay, that's amazing. Thank you very much for clarification. Brandon, what type of investments are available through EB-5? Can you please tell more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Most, if not all of the EB-5 projects available for investment will have a real estate component to them. And the reason, such as hotels, we don't see so many office buildings anymore because the office building space in the United States that sector is not doing very well, but there's been a lot in the past. So generally now it's, condos, residential housing, hotels, mixed-use development, something and everything that has a real estate component to it. And the reason for that generally is, the way that the investor job creation requirement is proven is through documented construction expenditure by the project. Put simply, if the project says at the beginning that our construction cost will be, say, $50 million, as long as the project spends that $50 million or more, the job creation is assumed to have happened, and then which helps the investor, more easily go through the process. And also, too, the investors tend to like projects with a real estate core because it gives them greater security in the event that there's a project failure or bankruptcy or default. The investor thinks, okay, well, that's not great, the project failed, but at least there's something there, tangible, that can be liquidated to receive some or all of my money back in the event of a project failure.
I see. I understand. Well, what about the regional centers? Many people don't understand what does it mean regional center and why the regional center opportunity, the regional center option is the most popular in EB-5 program.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's two separate EB-5 paths that one could take. The so-called regional center path that you just mentioned, and the so-called direct EB-5 path. So what the direct EB-5 path is the investor sets up their own business, own it, operate it, and is responsible for creating 10 jobs, 10 payroll jobs, full-time jobs through the business. But you can only have one EB-5 investor per direct project, and the employees actually have to be at the job site. The regional center program, developers like it and investors like it because it's basically a investment fund, a so-called pooled investment. So you can raise more funds, there's more investors in the project, and it provides greater assurances and security that the project will be completed. But the big difference that makes 99% of EB-5 investors go through a regional center project, basically there's two reasons. One, they don't have to manage the business day to day, whereas you do for the direct program. If you're in Dubai or Russia or Iran waiting for the EB-5 process, it's very difficult to manage a business in New York or California from
Right.
7,000 miles away. And, that's one
Absolutely.
practicality. But the big difference comes down to the way that the mandatory job creation, which is 10 jobs per investor, is much, much, much more favorable under the regional center program. Again, if the anticipated construction expenditure is met, the job creation is assumed to have happened, and the investor has met that job creation requirement.
Okay, okay. Makes sense. Yes. Thank you very much for the explanation. Brandon, another question that is also very common is that the minimum required investment amount for EB-5 program is the $800,000 right now. And this amount applies to the TEA zones, to the project that based on TEA zones. So can you please explain what is the difference between TEA and non-TEA zones and why and what is the difference between the investment amount?
Yeah, great question. So kind of like the regional center versus direct program, if I mentioned that, most investors go through a regional center as opposed to direct, the same is true with the investment amounts. And so the investment amounts are either $800,000 for a project that's located in a TEA, which targeted employment area. So what is a targeted employment area? It's a designated area where either the unemployment rate is 150% of the US national average, or a so-called rural or countryside area.
Hmm.
Versus if it's not in a rural area or a high unemployment area, the minimum investment amount increases to $1,050,000. So basically $250,000 more if it's not in a designated TEA. And so why is this? It's because the US government sees EB-5 as a way to channel investment to areas in the US that need more economic development. And so that's why they put the price difference in. You can invest in an area that's doing very, very, very well, but it's just going to cost you $250,000 more. Now, from my perspective, there's no real reason to invest in a $1,050,000 project because you get the same thing at the end, whether you invest 800,000 or $1,050,000, and that's a US green card. So there's kind of no point in tying up extra 250,000 for, 2 to 5 years if you don't have to. Now, one of the important issues that investors overseas need to understand is just because an area in the US is, so-called high unemployment or a rural area doesn't necessarily, especially for rural areas, doesn't mean it's a poor area. Doesn't mean necessarily it's economically undeveloped. In fact, Dennis, as in our past work, we were, worked on projects that were very successful in Manhattan, in the middle of New York.
Right, right. Yeah,
West 57th Street and Fifth Avenue, so-called Billionaires Row. I've lost count, but 5 or 6 successful projects on Manhattan's Billionaires Row. And how can that be? I just said that, the US government wants EB-5 money to go to economically depressed areas. And so how can Billionaires Row be economically depressed?
yeah,
And it's
that
just
was one of my questions. Yes.
it's and it's just, the developers who do EB-5, they do a lot of research and before they spend the money to get the EB-5 project together, they research the unemployment data, and the statistics can sometimes be in their favor to do projects in Billionaires Row or Wall Street or areas that, if you look at them, they would not seemingly qualify for the lower EB-5 investment amount, but they do.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's really impressive and really promising in terms of project's location for potential investors who usually, many investors choose the project that based in a known areas instead of unknown areas like New York or Florida.
Mhm.
So that is why investors sometimes ask how it can be that the $800,000 applied to a
Mhm.
project that is based in Manhattan, for example. So
Mhm.
yeah, thank you very much for the explanation. Another great thing about the new design of the EB-5 program is the waiting period. Can you please tell us more about it? So how long will it take to get the green card? Let's say if I'm an investor and I apply with your company to USCIS today, so how long should I wait? What will be the period of time?
Yeah, this is always the critical question. And I have a joke in my office, which is if you want to be 100% wrong 100% of the time, the best way to do that is to try and predict US immigration, EB-5, and other case processing times.
Okay, I see.
And, and so with that, here's my current prediction. And so one of the problems with the before the EB-5 law changed 2 years ago was the processing times for investors were uncertain, subject to change, and often far, far too long. And so the US government, when they modified the law, looked at this and said, well, okay, you US immigration authorities, you've done a very bad job in processing cases. This has to change. And in order to make you change to do your job faster and more efficiently, we're going to write into the new law um, targeted processing times
Mm,
for each of the 3 steps in the EB-5 process. And so you, US immigration authorities, can't sit on these EB-5 cases for, in some instances, several years before you take action. Now we're requiring you to take action within, 6 months if it's a case, an investment in a rural area, or roughly 8 to 9 months for general high unemployment. And what we've seen is that the US immigration authorities now are generally, not perfectly, but they're doing a much, much better job in meeting the targeted processing times established by the US Congress when they changed the law 2 years ago. So this is one of the changes that, in my opinion, makes this a golden era of EB-5, is more consistent and faster processing times. And so with that, if the investor and their families are overseas, I still want to build in a little bit of margin for error and say that if you start today, you can reasonably expect to have cleared the first two steps of the EB-5 process and be in the US with green cards in anywhere from 18 to 24 months.
Okay, okay. Well, it's still a bit long in comparison with other immigration programs. I mean, not in US, but in other countries. But I know that one of the great advantages right now in EB-5 program is that if the investor has any other type of US visa, and he will be inside the United States or can come to United States after the EB-5 petition has been filed, they can stay in United States and change their status. Is it correct?
That is correct. And Dennis, this is the biggest, most positive, beneficial change for the investor of the change in the EB-5 law 2 years ago. And so what you're referencing is known as concurrent filing. Concurrent filing has been around in other categories of US immigration for 20, 25 years. And so finally, in the March 2022 law, the ability to do concurrent filing was extended to EB-5 applicants as well. And so what that requires is if the principal investor and any family members want to speed up the process, they can combine the first two steps of the EB-5 process after they enter the United States, wait 90 days or more, then submit the first two rounds of EB-5 applications, which are the I-526E, and most importantly, the second stage, the I-485 application to adjust status in the United States. It's that approval of the I-485 that gives the investor and their family the 2-year conditional green card. Now, concurrent filing isn't necessarily for everyone because, one, you have to have a visitor visa or some other type of visa to come to the United States. Then you have to basically hang out and not work or do anything for 90 days before you can file. And then you still have to wait 3 to 6 months for a work permit and probably 3 to 6 months for a travel permit. So it's roughly a commitment of anywhere from 9 to 12 months of being stuck in the US and not being able to work while waiting for these processes to proceed. But still, it allows the investor and their family to get established in the United States while basically effectively as permanent residents while waiting for the permanent resident process to complete itself. This is hugely beneficial, hugely consequential, and we see a lot of concurrent filings from investors who, not necessarily parents, but they have their son or daughter is in the US on an F1 student visa. And, you know, this concurrent filing allows them so much more freedom, the ability to participate in the US job market, basically on the same footing as someone such as myself while waiting to become a permanent resident. At that point, they don't have to worry about student visas anymore. They don't have to worry about H-1B visa lotteries. They don't have to worry about, even slower green card processing and other categories. They basically move to the front of the line and, expedite their US immigration process, could be make it up to several years faster than under the prior law, which did not allow for concurrent filing.
Yeah, exactly. And this is really amazing, amazing news for EB-5 investors. Even while they're waiting for the job permit in the United States, as you said, they can establish themselves, they can start their life in US, and many people don't want to stay in their countries, right? I mean,
Right.
so they can move and almost immediately, which is amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
so it takes some coordination, it takes some planning, and so you definitely before any investors attempt to proceed down that path, they definitely need to talk to, you know, an attorney, someone at my office or me or someone who's knowledgeable and experienced in this field to come up with the proper plan before the concurrent filing process begins. But yes, if it can be made to work for you and your family, then definitely take advantage of that option.
yeah, yeah. And what about the process itself? Can you just briefly tell us about what the investor has to go through in the EB-5 process from very beginning up to they can get their citizenship?
That's a great question, Dennis. So overall, EB-5 is a three-step process for the investor and their families. So the first step of the process, which is known as the submission of the I-526E, that basically the U.S. government is looking at three things. Number one is the investor investing $800,000 or $1,050,000 into a qualifying EB-5 project. Yes or no? This question should be pretty much a yes in most, if not all instances, especially if the investor is investing in a regional center project. Why is that? Because one of the changes that's also investor friendly in the 2020-22 law is requiring projects to go through a pre-approval process before they start raising EB-5 funds.
Hmm.
So in most instances, we already know or have a good idea whether or not the project has already been approved or will be approved soon. So first element, investment into a qualifying EB-5 project. Second element, and probably the most important element of anything involved in EB-5 is we have to be able to document that the source of the $800,000 investment has come from clean money, legitimate sources. It's known as source of funds. Proving lawful source of funds is the most important element of the EB-5 process, period. Third and final item, and this goes back to the question about sanctioned banks in Russia and Iran and other places, is that we have to be able to document the money trail from its origin, however it gets from Russia, Iran, wherever the case may be, to the project in the US. So usually this can be sometimes a little bit tricky from investors from Russia and Iran, but it's not impossible. So again, just to recap, the three elements to get through the first stage of the process, the so-called I-526E, are investment into a qualifying EB-5 project, sourced from clean money, and the ability to document the money trail.
Okay. Well, yeah, I know that we already worked with your company with Russian investors and did the source of fund documentation for them. So I know that you personally and your company has a good experience in this. Well, that's amazing. And what about the removal of the condition from the green card? Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the removal is the third step. So let me just go back and cover the second step. The second step in the process, if you're in the United States, it's the I-485 adjustment of status application that I referenced earlier. Or if you're overseas, you go through an interview at a consular embassy. The second step in the process is where you and your family receive a 2-year conditional green card. Now, those should generally be approved without any problem unless the applicant has a history of U.S. Immigration violations or a criminal history or, goes to, Hezbollah or, Hamas training camps or things like that. Basically participates in terrorist activities, which, I generally don't see any of those in my applicants. Occasionally we have, which is a good thing.
Yeah, yes.
Occasionally, I don't think this is so much of it. I haven't seen this from Russian investors for a while, but we see this from like investors from China and Vietnam, where Communist Party membership can delay the issuance of the green card. But so basically, as long as you don't have any criminal history or immigration violations or other things along those lines, the second step approval should be pretty much guaranteed, or not guaranteed, but as close to guaranteed as one can possibly get. And so once that's approved, you get the 2-year green card, and then you wait 2 years, and then you move on to the third and final step of the EB-5 process that you just referenced, Dennis, which is the so-called removal of conditions. Removal of conditions, or what's known as the Form I-829, that's where mostly the project has to provide documentation that they took your investment and created the jobs that they needed to. So this is where the US government verifies that the project basically succeeded. And if it did, and the jobs were created, then quote unquote, the conditions on your permanent residence are removed. And then at that point, you and your family receive a green card valid for 10 years, that as long as you're paying taxes and maintaining sufficient physical presence in the US, you can keep renewing that green card every 10 years for the rest of your life. Or if you so choose, after 5 years, you and your family can apply for US citizenship in many instances.
Oh, okay. So it seems like a pretty easy process, like which includes several steps only, and
Mhm.
along with professional legal support, like
Mhm.
with the help of your company, the investor, the EB-5 investor, shouldn't have any problems or issues, right, going through the whole process.
No, these should generally be a very straightforward process. Again, most of the stress, hard work, difficulty um, is generally at the beginning when working through source of funds and path of funds. And if we can get through that, then everything else from there is generally smooth sailing.
Yeah, and just to move forward, I know that usually even before you start the process for EB-5 investors, and this is something that is based on my experience working with your company, I know that you never start the process before without the primarily consultation with a client. We're trying to understand, will you be able to provide him this kind of service? Maybe he has such a big issue with source of funds or something else, like you mentioned earlier. In this case, I know that your company even will not start the process.
That is correct. I mean, we all need to be assured of the source and path of funds before any of us get too far down down the road of EB-5. And so, because if you make the investment into the project prematurely before we all feel comfortable with source and path of funds, sometimes we have to reverse the entire transaction and start over again, which is a huge problem for for all parties. So definitely we don't want the investor to make an investment to a project or do any or move to the US or do any real giant steps before we all feel comfortable with the source and path of funds. Because yeah, if you can't prove source and path of funds, then those are you know you get off to a really bad start in EB-5 and it's hard to recover. So definitely want to have, you know, in-depth consultations with myself and my team before I really start taking affirmative steps
Yeah,
in
yeah.
process.
And this is what we do as well, because when we speak with the investor, we usually try to identify the potential for EB-5 program for the EB-5 investor, and then we introduce the investor to the legal company, so the legal company can review everything before they start the process to make sure that everything is on the line in order and everything is okay.
Yeah, and one thing I should stress, because I see this kind of globally, is that the investor in consultation with our office should not see the source of funds discussion as a negotiation with our office. Sometimes it's, investors treat us as like the immigration authorities. And so I get it. I mean, no one wants to provide more details about their finances and their wealth than are absolutely necessary. We understand that. And so that's our goal, is to try to, provide as much detail as possible to get you approved, while simultaneously providing as little detail as possible to third parties. And
Right.
so, so they shouldn't see this as negotiating with me or my team as to what what is the, minimum amount of information. We're telling you the minimum amount of information that you need to provide to get through the
Yes.
EB-5 process. And so, yeah, I mean, if we have to do subsequent negotiations with U.S. immigration based on what was provided, then so be it, and we can handle that. But yeah, I mean, follow our guidance and we will get you through the process.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. Brandon, like America, like many Americans says, this story sounds too good to be true. So we just, you really, but so what I want to say that I would like also to highlight some risks that EB-5 program has, because I don't want people have the impression that EB-5 program is something that is guaranteed
Mhm.
by the U.S. government. So can you please tell us more about potential risks that EB-5 investor may face in this process?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, EB-5 is not risk-free, and then the US government has set it up that way. And so the main tenet is that the investment funds have to be quote unquote at risk. And so unlike some other programs like the old Canadian program was famous for this, where it was basically, you know, guaranteed return of investment. EB-5 is not set up that way. So the investor does bear investment risk. And as a result, the biggest risk that investors face is potential project failure. And that's a twofold project failure. One, that the project fails to create the jobs, and two, that the project cannot refund the investor's capital when the time comes. Those risks, they're related, but they're actually separate. So you can have a situation where the project quote unquote fails and can't refund the investor the 800,000 when the time comes, but the jobs were actually created before that project failed. So the investor can complete the EB-5 process, but probably doesn't receive their money back. That's a failure, but it's a partial failure. We even sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes see instances where the project refunds the money but doesn't create the jobs. To me, that's a worse outcome, because the investor hasn't received the green card and was probably waiting several years. The good thing is that the percentage of people that fail to complete the process, either because of project failure or the, you know, um, failure to create jobs or failure to get money back, is less than 10%. And which 10% is still too high, in my opinion, but it's pretty low, and that's trending downward. And the reason why it's trending downward is because the EB-5 project market has changed over the years. 15 years, 10, 15 years or so ago, some of the project operators in the EB-5 space were not the most reputable or the most experienced. They basically didn't know what they were doing. That's changed over the years. And so, we saw 10 plus years ago, sophisticated developers and finance groups, such as the one, Dennis, that you were involved in previously before setting up EB-5 Expert, coming into the EB-5 space, which had the positive impact of improving the projects available to EB-5 investors.
Right.
And now, with the US government requiring projects to go through a pre-approval process, this is even more, has an even more positive effect of elevating the overall average quality of projects on the EB-5 market. Because, 10, 15 years ago, when you didn't have to go through this pre-approval process, the barriers to entry were a lot lower. Now projects have to spend a significant amount of money, 150, 200,000, 250,000, just to get the project pre-approval. So not every real estate group has the ability or desire to spend that money.
Yeah,
So as a result, the projects have on average improved, but that makes one of the more critical elements is project due diligence from the beginning, so that you don't select a project that's not going to deliver the results that you and your family need.
I see. Well, this is very interesting. And in these regards, could you be so kind to give some recommendations for EB-5 investors? So what are the main like critical criteria while they trying to choose the EB-5 project? I mean, the regional center. So what are the most important they have to pay attention to?
In the EB-5 space, reputation is key. The EB-5 regional center groups and developers that are out there, their track record is, there's no one place you can go to find out the exact track record of success of an EB-5 project. Everyone always says that they've been completely successful and all of that. But the EB-5 industry is very small. People generally know and can more or less verify the claims of success or failure of any particular group. So reputation is key. How much experience do the developers have? What's their track record in EB-5? All that information is relatively easy to find out by asking people such as ourselves who are involved in this space every day. And any group that's had an return of EB-5 investor capital is happy to tell
Yes,
you in the industry about that. And so, and that's probably the best way to assess, the true measure of success in EB-5 is, okay, not all groups have gotten to the point now where, because of timelines where they've been able to refund EB-5 capital. So it's a little bit unfair to some groups just because they haven't been around long enough, but they will. But yeah, success and failure on the regional center and developer level is relatively easy to verify.
I see. I see. Well, thanks a lot. And what about recommendation from the legal attorney? Let's say if the investor applies to your company to support them in the EB-5 process, can you recommend them the project to invest?
So project recommendation. So this is a great question, Dennis. So
Yes.
um, I can.
Yeah,
Most of my other attorney
but
colleagues
explain why. Yes.
cannot. So yes. So the US government sees EB-5 investments. It's not only an immigration program, but it's an investment program. So the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission and the financial regulatory authorities see EB-5 as an investment program. Therefore, in order for anybody in the United States to recommend a project, they have to have appropriate licenses issued by what's known as FINRA. So basically, FINRA is a group that licenses people to provide financial advice. I have the relevant licenses from FINRA to make project recommendations, in addition to my law license to process EB-5. As far as I know at the present time, I'm the only person in the United States that's both an active attorney and has the relevant FINRA licenses to make explicit project recommendations.
Amazing. Amazing.
And it was an arduous process. There is someone that recently obtained their licenses and gave up on the law practice, which is something I could totally understand. But yeah, as far as I know right now, I'm the only person in the U.S. has both the relevant FINRA licenses and the law license to do both the legal work and the project advisory work.
Okay. Well, yeah, so it means that if the immigration attorney gives the any kind of recommendation for the project, it means that this recommendation has to be done by the law, I mean, based on the license, right? So it's not just, oh, invest there or invest there,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I went and obtained the licenses was that, you know, potential EB-5 investors are overseas, they want to do the project due diligence. It's very difficult to do so from
Right.
Dubai, Iran, or Moscow. And so, the attorney becomes often the first, if not only point of contact that they
Absolutely.
have in the EB. And so, they would ask over and over again, justifiably so, hey, Brandon, you're experienced in this field, all the regional centers. So then give us the project recommendations. And so that put me in a difficult position because I'd either have to say, yeah, I could do this, but I can't. So you're on your own.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
luck. Or, well, I'm not supposed to, but let me, you know, I'm going to do they're not recommendations, they're just introductions. And
Yes,
so it's
exactly.
very difficult. So I said, forget it, I went and spent the the considerable amount of time to get the licenses. So now when the project recommendation issue comes up, I can better serve my clients in helping them make the decision that's the best for them and their family in the EB-5 process.
Amazing. Well, that's great. So now we know to whom we can apply to ask for the recommendation. Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Well, Brandon, one more question that you already mentioned about the source of fund documentation, which is probably one of the critical point in the EB-5 process. I know that the bank loan is allowed to be the source of fund in EB-5 process. But can you please also mention other types of sources that can be mentioned, documented as the source of their funds? So what kind of sources the EB-5 investors may have?
Yeah, absolutely. So, source of funds, I mean, will generally fall in, it's always different for everyone, but generally falls into, a set pattern. And so one is, bank loans is one popular way. Um, people acquire and sell real estate. That's very, very popular. We just have to document the source of funds used to purchase that, condo in Moscow or Dubai from the beginning. That's a great way to do it because you can either obtain a mortgage against the condo in Dubai, or if there's been,
Right.
appreciation. So if you bought it for, say, 200,000, just rough numbers, 250,000, but then sold it for 1 million, then that makes our source of funds problem a lot less because we just have to show, the source and path of the 250,000 used to buy the condo initially, and then, the capital gains on it provides us with the sufficient liquidity to do the EB-5. Some people sell their companies, or, the company generates sufficient cash flow so they can take, a dividend or a bonus from their company to do EB-5. Gift from someone to, family friend or family member to do EB-5 is another way to do it. Whoever provides the gift has to likewise be able to document their source of funds of the gift. And so it's kind of like a chessboard in a way. There's all these moving parts, maybe a little bit of a bank loan, maybe a little bit of a gift, maybe a little bit of a company dividend. And this is all a part of the discussion with the investor too. It's not not a negotiation, but it's figuring out which moves make the most sense on the
Yes.
chess. That's
Yeah.
what source of funds is about.
Okay. Nice. Well, Brandon, I have a couple of more questions that I would like to ask you
Sure, absolutely.
today. Uh, Uh, can you tell us what will happen with the money of the investor with his investments in case the petition will be denied, and if there any chance to resubmit the petition or to fight somehow with the USCIS if it's denied?
Absolutely. So we'll take the last question first, and because
Yes.
this is actually something that changed in the EB-5 law. In the old EB-5 law, if a project failed along the way, then the investor and their families were a lot of times lost the EB-5 process and had to either give up or start over again. The provision in the law that says, okay, if you invested in a failed project and it failed because of the project and nothing to do with you, then there are ways to, it may require an additional investment, but there are ways to pivot to another project and keep the process going so that, so basically, so you don't have to start over again. I mean, it's an uncomfortable position to be in, but that's another investor-friendly change in the law that allows you to move to another project and keep the process going. Now, that's obviously at the end. Now, if you're denied before that, you have the ability, you always have the ability to fight it at every step in the way, either 526, 485, or at the consulate and at the I-829 stage. Fortunately, we don't have to fight too much, but occasionally we do. And you, the investor, actually do have legal protection and rights and the ability to fight these things if need be, if necessary. And so hopefully it doesn't happen, but if it does happen, we can all do that for you.
Okay. Well, really promising. Uh, One more thing that I would like to ask, which is very popular among our investors, is that many people are very happy with the perspective of getting a green card because everybody understands that the green card grants you a lot of rights. But at the same time, many people do not think that besides rights, you will have a lot of obligations. And
Yes.
one of the main of them is related to taxes. So can you please tell us, once the applicant get a green card, like his application is approved and he moved to United States, or she with a family, uh, what kind of main obligations they have to follow?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main obligation is once you move to the US, permanent residence, you have to file US tax returns every year. And you have to report, and you pay US taxes on your worldwide income. So
Hmm.
this is something that is a little different than, say, Greece or Portugal or Spain, to my knowledge, which, as far as I know, only care about taxation on income generated. It's Spain, Portugal, and Greece. The US government wants you to pay taxes on your income generated in Dubai or Iran or Russia or wherever in the world that income is generated. However, so this is a part of our office doesn't, because we're not tax experts, we don't get directly involved in this discussions, but again, one of the discussions that needs to happen at the beginning is consultation with a US tax expert to, engage in tax planning exercises to minimize, to the extent legally possible, your tax obligations once you set foot in the US. And so this may require, the establishment of trusts overseas or whatever the case may be. But pre-immigration US tax planning is very, very important, and we can provide um, resources, referrals to individuals and firms that engage in this exercise. And because that likewise needs to happen at the beginning, because yeah,
Right.
you don't want that 5 years from now that, hey, surprise, hey, Sergey, surprise, here's your tax bill for $5 million based upon, because you forgot to report, we found that you
Right.
have this company in Dubai that's doing very, very well. You want to avoid that particular issue. But yes, you definitely want and need to file US tax returns every year, not only to keep your green card, but if and when you decide to apply for US citizenship, that's pretty much the main issue that the US government cares about in deciding whether or not to approve your citizenship application, which is, again, have you been keeping up on your taxes since you became a green card holder? And, that, and, have you committed any crimes since you become a green card holder? That's basically it. So, yeah, so planning ahead before you set foot in the US, very, very important. And keeping up on your tax obligations thereafter, definitely, definitely important.
Okay. Okay. Brandon, two more questions. One of them is related to uh, the difference between U.S. citizen and U.S. green card holder.
Mhm.
What is the main difference? I would say usually when we consult, when we talk with the investors, we say that the main difference between US passport and the green card is the right to participate on different kind of like local and federal votes. But can you, from the legal perspective, legal side, can you tell us what is the main difference between passport and the green card?
Yeah, there's four differences really. So one that you mentioned, yeah, okay, five. One, if the US ever reinstituted a military draft, which hasn't happened in 45 years and is unlikely to happen. But that would be one requirement. Two, the one that you mentioned, the ability to vote in state, federal, and some local elections requires US citizenship. Three, this is kind of, I mentioned briefly physical presence in the United States. So this is an anomaly. So like if you have a green card, you are required to maintain a certain level of time in the United States at risk of losing the green card. However, if you have a US passport, you never have to return to the US ever again. So
Really?
like, yeah, so it's weird. It's like if you have a green card, you should try to spend at least 6 months a year in the US. But if you have a passport, you can leave the US and never return for 25 years and keep your US citizenship, which is strange, but that's just the law. You still have to pay taxes if you have a US passport and go back to live in Russia and Iran, but otherwise, no one can generally strip you of your US citizenship. You can lose your green card. Let's just say, for example, you go out with friends one night, you have, one or two more vodkas than you should, and you drive home and you get pulled over by the police or something happens. If you're a US citizen, yeah, you might still go to jail for your, driving while intoxicated, but no one's going to strip you of your US citizenship generally. But you could lose your green card in that situation. And
Mm,
I've seen that where people were on green cards for, 30, 40 years, drive home, something happens, nothing major, but then yeah, they lose their permanent residence as a
okay.
result. And so doesn't happen often, but it can happen. And so, yeah, it's harder to be stripped of your U.S. citizenship than it is to be stripped of your permanent resident status. So those
Okay.
are the four differences. And there's a fifth one, which just escaped me, but it's likewise kind of minor and very limited, but could the ability. So for example, this is key for investors from Russia and Iran and other places that need visas to travel to certain
Right.
countries.
Yes.
So a green card holder, you're still viewed as a citizen of Russia, Iran, Ukraine, and subject to visa requirements to go visit, I don't know, say Japan, for example. Whereas if you have a US passport, then, you now have visa-free access to a lot more countries than you do as a Russian or Iranian citizen with a green card.
I see. I understand. Well, it seems that it's really a good chance for people around the globe to immigrate to United States in a very safe and pretty fast way, along with their families.
Mhm.
However, it's very important to find the right legal partner in United States, and this is my last question that I have right now. We already know you. We know about your experience, your knowledge in EB-5, and everybody now understands that they can apply to your company in order to find support in EB-5 process. But I would like to ask you how much the investor has to pay you in order to have such support in EB-5 process.
Yeah, we can certainly talk about that individually, but I will say that
I mean,
um,
roughly, so I just
yeah, so
generally to understand.
yeah, absolutely. So the US government increased all the processing fees effective April 1st, 2024. Very substantial. So in some instances, increased them 300 to 400% over what they were previously. So roughly speaking, over the three steps of the EB-5 process, I do some quick math in my head. Uh, the investor, depending on how many family members they have, of course, should expect to pay roughly $50,000 in combined legal and US government processing fees. Now
Okay,
that's spread out over the three steps of the process, so roughly 5 years. If the investor does concurrent filing in the US, the first two steps of legal and government processing fees are paid then. But generally speaking, in the range of $50,000 of legal and government processing fees spread out over 4 to 5 years.
okay, okay. Well, thank you very much. Brandon, well, I said that that was the last question, but fine, I have another one. Uh,
I have some
so
time. It's fine.
yeah, I mean that where people have to go if they want to study B5 program with Mayor Brandon Meyer, where have to go?
They just have to reach out to either you or myself um, directly. So you can provide my contact information to the audience. Happy to have a conversation with the potential investor and their family at a mutually convenient time.
Okay, okay. Well, Brandon, dear sir and madam, thank you very much for this amazing interview today, for your time, for watching this interview with Brandon Mayer. Welcome all the time. come to our office in Dubai, call us. You see the all contact information on the screen. So you can call us, contact us, ask, and go through the EB-5 process. Brandon, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis. Great talking to you today. Thank you for the very, very probing questions. I think this was very informative to the audience. And yeah, to the extent that either of us were unclear or if and, additional information is needed, I'm sure we'll be happy to provide that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.